the 19th of December 2022. I'm your host, Dana Durnford. I hope you're doing well on this Monday evening. You can call in at 709-589-4406. And this is Nuclear for Dummies. For those who are seeking, you couldn't have found a better place. Let's get after it. We're going to go through a lot of stories tonight that we didn't get to for the last three shows. And they're gathering up dust. The dust becomes permanent if you don't get it the first week, right? It's down to black hole, and they got away with it. Nobody recognized. So Fukushima is like eating a banana. This is common propaganda, walking in sunshine, getting on an airplane. That's what journalists do for a living, and other disgusting stuff. But that's murder. They're wearing tungsten vests out in front of Reactor 3, apparently, was the headlines. They being the homeless in their paper suits. You know they're the homeless when you see them in paper suits? They're the homeless. When the man in front of you drops dead, pick up the fuel rod and run. What was interesting about that picture? Anybody know? I'm just going to leave it up there for a few minutes. Anybody know what's wrong with this picture? I'm watching the comments section. Let's see if anybody in the comments section picked up on it. What's wrong in this picture besides me? Whoo, that's pretty hot. Danger, danger. It's about a 15-minute delay, or 15-second delay, 15-minute delay, 15-second delay from my live stream to your internet provider in North America. Did anybody pick up on it? It's blurred on his arm. We have a winner. Thank you, James. Why is it blurred? Yeah, the Geiger counter doesn't show up when I'm in this window. Unfortunately, I haven't. I don't know why it does that. Yeah, why is that blurred? I can't. Is it torn or? It looks like a brand new paper suit to me. It's very confusing. Anybody who worked along there, they would have died that day. Tungsten vest or not. This guy is only wearing a handmade rubber vest. Look at that. That's like they used at Chernobyl where they made their own vest out of lead. These guys got on tungsten vest, but that's not going to protect. Well, that'll protect your organs temporarily. If you stay there for... Just the whole story is shocking, isn't it? So the official story is... That's the official picture, and that's the official picture. This fuel pool would be 120 feet above the carnage over there. But they're the official fuel pool of that building. Look at them in their paper suits. TEPCO says they burned 7,000 of them each day. This is... I know you're going to see I photoshopped it. This is farmers harvesting food right alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation in an evacuation community in a no-go zone. And 55 countries banned the food from 14 prefectures. I marked them on the charts for you, which is almost half of Japan. And so we got a poll tonight. We got a poll, if I can find my way there. Hello, everybody. Yeah, why is the arm blurred out, right? Hat logo. Nice one. Could be. I never noticed that one. Should the sale of radioactive food grown around nuclear power plants, also known as disease factories, be banned? The first vote I got was no. Everything else was yes. So imagine you're pro-nuclear and you know you're going to poison people by selling the food, and you see somebody having a poll, and there's just contempt for all life, you vote no. Because there's no other reason to do it. It's just this contempt of everything and everybody. Why participate in something so evil? What's the point? You're not smart, you're an idiot. Like these people that are harvesting food alongside of 1-ton bags. Now, most farms, as you'll see coming up, are surrounded by nuclear power plants, rather, are surrounded by farms. 27,000 becquerels a kilogram cesium in the kindergarten near the west coast of Japan, 200 kilometers from the Meltdown. So growing food in the no-go zone is probably stupid, right? 4 million becquerels square meters cesium is soil in Chiba. Chiba is 20 kilometers from Tokyo. 4 million becquerels, if your child gets that in you, you get that in you, 4 million becquerels, that means it's like 4,000 cuts, and your body will attack you with white blood cells, 4 million rather. But these are going to pulse energy every second for the rest of your life, or the birds, or insects, or animals, or, hopefully you get the picture. Growing food in the nuclear wasteland with ongoing meltdowns, that's a whole level above of evilness that I got nothing to compare that to. Like Hitler, whatever, Machiavellian, nothing comes close to that kind of evilness. That's like on a whole different level. And by the way, so is the fact that the majority of farms are surrounded, taken hostage by, nuclear plants are taken hostage by farms. Notice how the farmers built all their farms right close to the nuclear power plant? Anti-nuclear farms, anti-human farms. This is the nuclear industry builds their disease factories, and this is 2 future ones in the United Kingdom, both of them situated in massive farmland. Like, come on, man. Come on, right? So how did that work anyway with the engineers? Well, yeah, we want you to drop Hinkley Point C nuclear plant, Sizewell C nuclear plant. And so, well, we only got one question. Which farming land you're going to put that thing in? I bet you that's exactly what happened, right? Well, I'd like to put it right there, but there's millions of 1-ton bags of radiation, and the farmers there will get upset with us if we set up shop there. Now, there's tons of studies saying how stupid that actually is. Accumulation of radionuclides by plants as a monitoring system. The plants are going to soak up the radiation, so let's build a nuke plant in farmland. What could possibly go wrong? The IAEA, and whenever you hear me calling them, I show you caricatures of them like being the devil and Satan and everything else. It's basically because of this one story right here drove me over the deep edge. Let me explain it to you. It's nuclear for dummies, after all. I'm a dummy and you're here to learn. IAEA today admitted there's no such thing as safe levels of radiation. Okay, that's interesting, Dana. That the standards are based on natural stuff, not man-made. Does the world actually understand how impossible that headline actually should be? The IAEA's allowable radiation standards are based on walking in sunshine, potato chips, sleeping next to somebody, climbing mountains, flying on an airplane, but not nuclear radiation, anthropogenic man-made fallout. No. Based on bananas. It's not illegal to poison you on top of that. That should be reassuring to all the pro-nuclear community. Allowable radiation standards are based on benefits. There is no benefit for man-made radiation. Not safety. It never stops, unfortunately. Nuclear radiation, by the way, is the most carcinogenic thing that exists. Kind of brings a bit more levity to this story, don't it? They admit that there's no such thing as a safe level and that the allowable standards are based on a benefit. Okay, so let me do the first sentence again, because obviously there's a whole lot of people on this planet can't wrap their mind around this. The International Atomic Energy Agency, aka demonic sadistic demons, admitted there's no such thing as a safe level of radiation. What did the top cancer doctors say? Nuclear radiation is the most carcinogenic thing that exists. The IAEA said, well, in that case, our standards are going to be based on bananas, not on man-made radiation. Because then you can't have a nuclear plant, and you certainly couldn't have one surrounded by farms. Probably a real stupid idea, wouldn't you think? Because of all of these studies saying if they study 3 isotopes, guess what they're going to find? At least those 3. This is Sellafield's, by the way. Child's risk of cancer from radiation is up to 100 times higher. It's actually several thousand than an adult who had the same exposure. The adult's going to get sick too. It's just not going to manifest the same way, but they're going to get sick from eating this or drinking it or breathing it or worse, consuming it. That's why we got a poll tonight. Make sure you chip in there. Why are all these firms, and in this case little communities, a target for nuclear power plants? Because they're constantly hemorrhaging radiation from the fuel pools. They're still splitting the atoms they were for millions of homes. It's just no longer under pressure and there's no containment. And so it's going to boil off. Each fuel pool is going to boil off about 120,000 liters. 120,000 liters. Does it look like 120,000 people living there? No. This is all day, every day. These fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation. And not only that, there's up to 1,800 illnesses and diseases. I'll explain that a bit better at the end of it. Why are nuclear power plants surrounded by farms? Why are they building them in farmland? Radiation health specialists, children with 11 becquerels a kilogram in cesium start to see heart problems. Maybe that's why the United States and Europe, after Fukushima, raised their limits to 1,000. Or maybe that explains why Boris Johnson 2 years ago removed the restrictions from food for baby food and cereal for United Kingdom children, and then this year removed the restrictions for the adults in Fukushima nuclear wasteland. And gloated about it too in the media. Do you think this is bad enough? These are nuclear plants, but doing this around nuclear meltdowns like Sellafield. This is Sellafield. Surrounded by farms for 60 odd years, poison the population, and they know they're going to poison the population. Radiation in the potatoes. Columbia medical professor inhaling just one radioactive hot particle can cause a cancer. And guess what's coming out of these things all day? Hot particles. The curium isotopes are the biggest byproduct. The fuel rods are still splitting the atoms. When people say, well, you got nuclear waste is really dangerous, they don't know what it actually means. What it means is it's hemorrhaging radiation, constantly invisible, that can't be perceived. You can't see it or smell it or taste it or hear it or touch it or feel it or pick it up. Unless it's in your food and your water, the air you're breathing. The influence of the development of the temperate fruit tree species for potential uptake of radionuclides. So they know this is stupid. And they know it's stupid to have a kid's swing set there too. 50 becquerels a kilogram in adults lead to irreversible lesions in your vital organs. Irreversible lesions. That's a brutal downhill march after that. It catches up at you at some point, or quickly, depending on if you keep consuming it and bioaccumulating it. Your body attacks everything in your body, which is man-made radiation I'm talking about. So if you keep eating it and drinking it, washing in it and breathing it, your body has to produce more white blood cells constantly, which means it displaces your red that are carrying oxygen and nutrition. So it's instant cause and effect. And why is all these nuclear plants built in farmland? So they can move the radiation off-site a lot better. Before Fukushima, 100 becquerels a kilogram of cesium is nuclear waste. After 100 becquerels a kilogram of cesium is safe to eat, but it's not. In fact, it was 500 becquerels a kilogram for the first a little over a year. They've dropped it down to 100 becquerels a kilogram because after the first year it was over 865,000 extra cancers, which is only one of 1,800 illnesses that'll show up. 50 becquerels a kilogram in humans lead to irreversible lesions in your organs. If you're eating that food, you're getting more than that. 134, cesium, 85 strontium in fruit plants from nuclear industry. Dangerous radiation mishaps surge across this is Western Australia, north-southwest Australia. So, that was in the wrong spot. That should be down here. I still got 3 to go. So the reason you don't want this in farms, first off, is because the radioactive material from the reactor is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. And because it's pulsing energy every second for your entire life, eventually it builds a tumor around it, but it weakens your immune system. Radiation is like explosions going off in your cells. It's like explosions every second going off in your cells and your chromosomes and your DNA. You get long-term immune dysfunction. If you inject a flu virus into the mice, it will eventually kill the irradiated animals. In normal animals, this isn't the case. So the immune system is compromised for long periods of time after radiation exposure. The concept is that we're generating damage which is cascading down through your entire the makeup of your entire body, your chromosomes, your DNA, your hormones. You can read it. It's worth coming back to read. I get a screen capture of it because it compromises your immune system. On top of that, it leaves you more susceptible to pathogens and viruses and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies, injuries, illnesses that were normally harmless and innocuous and benign. But when you start consuming this, now you're more susceptible to, particularly as you get older, these strains of flus that they're releasing from the laboratories are vicious, and it's been going on for many decades. And, of course, after they get used to doing it for generations, then evil is the way of life, right? And there's no incentive not to be evil. Guess what happens with a government? Dangerous radiation mishaps surge across Australia hospitals. Let me see if I can find it. Radiation accidents have surged across hospitals in Australia. I think this is Australia. Let's see in a second. In one instance referred to the health watchdog, a cancer patient's radiation treatment was bungled This happens regularly. We cover a lot of stories and academic studies about this, where they inject it into the flesh instead of the tumor. It doesn't matter where you inject it; it's going to migrate anyway. But this is very dangerous because the numbers we're talking about are frightening. They put them in $1 million rooms after that are lead lined so they don't irradiate everybody in the hallways. That's what they do, right? There was 263 accidents across the state, an average of 5 a week in north-southwest Australia. A 26% increase on the total accidents reported in the previous year, because Fukushima is chewing up your white blood cells and people have less red blood cells and are making simple mistakes all the time. It's going to just escalate. Car accidents, road rage, airplane rage especially, you'll see start to go up. And we're in real trouble. As the oxygen supply goes down on top of that worldwide. Said a report published without fanfare last week. Well, Canadian media never reported on the fact we lifted all restrictions on Japan's food after 93 days. Hateful nuclear industry in Canada. It's hateful. It's unbelievably hateful. People should raise their children to work in that industry so they can sabotage them before they get out of control. With the majority due to the failures to follow procedures, this is the nuclear industry. This is normal. Equipment failure. The list is, what the hell are you people doing? Anyway, we're going to zip through all kinds of stories tonight. We're not going to really, we're not really going to try to flush out all the lies in each story because you can't keep up with it anyway. Hence the reason we're doing this show tonight. Behind the Tokyo Olympic bribery scandals. Scandal! This is a well-oiled machine that's been going on for decades with huge bribes, huge amounts. And the lobbyists, you can see them celebrating. Is that Shinzo Abe right there, or is that just me? That's him right there, right? That's his toe. Piece of shit. I was so glad when they shot that fucker, man. Did I just say that out loud? Shit. Well, I was, so I guess it's not a lie anyway. Not nice. At least I never lied. If I had said poor bastard, that would be lying, right? You know it. You know what I'm saying. If I was in Japan, I would go down every day and piss on his grave. Let's put it that way. And I'm not normally a mean person either. Debate over nuclear fuel recycling heats up. In the United States, the San Diego Union. Mixed oxide fuel. Let me remind the journalist that posted that article. The first thing that should be said in an article like that is it's illegal to make mixed oxide fuel in America. Oh, and by the way, Canada. And if they do it, then it's through sedition. And Sam Brighton probably had a hand in it before he got caught stealing purses. As if you don't make enough money. Is that Yukon Mountain? Yeah, that's Yukon Mountain. Problem with Yukon Mountain was it's on an earthquake fault line. They knew it. There was $20 billion gaffed in litigation. $20 billion spent on litigation. Fighting over it. At the end of it, they wanted to put... Now, the theory about Yukon Mountain was how much heat can it hold for 200 years? And that's how much waste they can put in there. That's how they saw this. And at the end of it, a couple of years back, before it finally got canned, they wanted to put all kinds of air conditionings so they can drop the temperature and stuff more waste in there. And how are you going to manage this air conditioning if something goes wrong? Can't go in and fix anything. Like what the industry is just The biggest problem with the nuclear industry is in the workforce itself. The biggest problem is fuel pools and the endless dumping and the nuclear testing. That was a huge, devastating war. It's the same bombs, the same radioactive fallout. Don't downplay the risk of nuclear energy use. France has a lesson for the nuclear fuel recycling. 2 letters without any opposing views argue the U.S. should recycle waste from the water-boiling nuclear plants since France does. France has polluted the entire Europe and the Arctic. And along with Sellafield and Donneray, of course, the reprocessing facilities in the UK. Since these reactors produce no carbon dioxide, well, they need 2 gas, oil, coal plants just to run, moron. Anyway, I'm not going to get into a big fight. But all these plants emit radioactive gases. What? Wait, somebody just said that out loud. They cannot be trapped and all create plutonium waste from the filthy fission reaction. My God, I love this person. Who the hell wrote that sentence? That's like 3 times in less than a week we got people coming out and bash the nuclear industry. What the frig is the... What was the probability of that over the last decade? Just because France continues to play, which is actually 0, right? Just because France continues to play with the material, which eventually still produce waste with extremely long half-lives and no carbon dioxide is produced again in the process, like that's absurd to suggest it. It does not mean it's acceptable or proper. People get sucked into this no carbon propaganda. It's everywhere, and you can't blame people, right? Well, since 2015. Because once they done the French panic, they were panicking in 2015. So France was selected by United Nations for Constipated Party 2015. Conference of Parties. Constipated Parties. Apples, tomatoes. It's starting to cool down. I like it. We got a poll. Got a poll. Should the sale of radioactive food grown around nuclear disease factories, also known as nuclear power plants, be banned worldwide? I didn't have enough room to put in the word worldwide, so I put in banned. We're climbing up. We got 18 likes. What the hell, man? What do you got to do to get someone to give you a like around here? 25 people. That's pretty good. There's a lot of people in the West Coast watch this show. Lots watch it later. Google doesn't register it, of course, because having an educational program is a crime on YouTube. There's not enough propaganda, Dana. Russia jails people carrying marijuana in the name of public health while stockpiling radioactive plutonium to poison political opponents. There's a lot of good stories we're not going to get to tonight, unfortunately. We're not going to cover it, or that. We'll cover this, though. Why the hell are they growing food right alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation and harvesting it in the middle of a no-go zone in a great big fucking nuclear wasteland? Why? Should the sale of radioactive food grown around disease factories, also known as nuclear power plants, be banned? Yeah, now I got 22 thumbs up. You guys are the best. Freelance journalist in Japan. Fukushima government is dumping tons of radioactive mud from decontamination into the rivers at night. This is not just one night. This was every night for years. Press watches the government dumps radioactive waste in Tokyo Bay. Radioactive waste. And they're growing food everywhere. And all of these nuclear wastelands were banned by 55 countries, not Canada, but 55 real countries for 10 years. Canada removed all restrictions after 93 days. Like, we'll take it. Yeah. Let's poison everybody in Canada. Government says 1,500 tons of highly radioactive sludge may end up as gardening. It's 50,000 tons of sludge from the water treatment facility has so much radiation they can't get rid of it. So 50,000 tons. So their water filtration creates sediment as a byproduct. The sediment is so radioactive they have 50,000 tons of it. The water filtration filters can't filter radiation. Which means what? Anybody? Everybody got poisoned constantly all day. Their water, drinking, laundry, showers. Just wrong, man. The industry is just, it's disgusting. It spoiled the planet before it finally got outed. And it done it through deceit and dishonesty with radioactive emissions from thousands of fuel pools and multiple meltdowns. Over 4,000 becquerels a kilogram of cesium. Contamination never disappears. In the fog. Cesium is just one of 1,000 fission products would have been in the fog, by the way. Multiply it by 600 to get the right number. Deadly prefectures. That freaks me out, you know, that picture. Harvesting food. This was from the newspaper saying people shouldn't stigmatize the farmers because he's trying to make a buck. Instead of this criminal is growing food in a nuclear wasteland, they're like, no, he's the good guy. You're the bad guy. Try making this up on your own. Highly radioactive sewage was 30 kilometers away of cesium, again, just acknowledging gamma. 334,000 becquerels a kilogram for the excrement. So each becquerel, think of it as atom in your body pulsing. Every second, almost the speed of light. And you got per kilogram of excrement is 334 becquerels. Well, you would have sequestered probably twice that in your body. That's usually called leukemia, right? Same as that food there is leukemia maker. And giving it to children is crimes against humanity on a whole different level. Debris from Fukushima nuclear meltdown is being ground up and buried in other parts of Japan. Burned. Atlantic. Is government trying to contaminate every region of Japan by burning radioactive debris? These are dirty bombs by the kilogram, or by the ounce, actually. If everyone is contaminated in a relative sense, nobody is. And that country, in 3% of the land, they picked up 30 to 60 million one-ton bags. Nobody will know the truth. We're only talking about what they put in bags. We're not talking about what they dumped in the rivers every day at nighttime. Energy transition driving a nuclear resurgence. Energy transition. And so that's Imperial College of London, which have committed so many crimes against humanity, like Geraldine Thomas. Dr. Geraldine Thomas. She murders children with radiation for a hobby, apparently. She's a professor on top of that. And she goes around doing presentations saying Fukushima is like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine. And she peer reviews thyroid studies on children. And there's presentations of her out there. She can't keep her mouth shut on top of that. According to the chair of the National Nuclear, which sounds probably right. So, energy transition driving the nuclear resurgence, says the chair of the National Nuclear Laboratory. But there is no nuclear renaissance. Last year, it was 0.4 gigawatts of nuclear and 291 gigawatts of renewables came online worldwide, which is equal to 333 large nuclear power plants in renewables coming online in just 12 months. Nuclear is I hate to say the word dead horse, but It's like, it's equivalent to putting a dead horse in a race. And by the time they can actually build something, the renewable industry is going to completely curb stomp the industry. Certainly by 2026, there'll be enough new renewables in a 6-year period, 2020-2026. That's 6 years. There's around 4,800 gigawatts of renewables online. That's equal to all gas, oil, coal, nuclear plants combined worldwide, and it's equal to 5,500 large nuclear power plants coming online in just 6 years. And because they're suppressing and stopping the funding of storage, and not batteries, but the good, easy and simple and stupid and mindless and plentiful systems that are available and could be, if you took the stupid universities off nuclear fabled small modular reactors and fusion, and you switch that into solving geothermal, which is not hard to solve. But if you were to do something like that, you would solve it worldwide in less than 12 months. And the price would be 1/50 of any nuclear plant on the planet. Because you would solve... And the only thing I got to solve is, the actual drilling anywhere. Because you're limited, but you're only limited because you can't drill deep enough. But you can blast it now with lasers and evaporate it, see? And it's being held back and suppressed along with storage. We don't need storage with geothermal. So again, this was the nuclear industry making these statements, making these headlines, and no less that they've done it from the Imperial College in London. So it's not a real headline, it's nuclear hype. Imperial College is not going to go down there and mark on all these bags, Dana is wrong, okay? It's never going to happen. They're not going to go down there and say, this is wrong. They're going to say the opposite when they know it's wrong. Tokyo neighbors see some approaching levels just in the dust after the incinerated massive amount of radiation or garbage. They releases the radiation into an environment because you can't destroy it. So 70,000 becquerels a kilogram of ash. This was what they were putting close to the seating area for the Olympics in Tokyo. And there was a lot of speculation it's going to blow and wash out into the swimming area alongside of where they're going to have races. Professor now reveals a high level of radioactive material detected 1,000 kilometers from Fukushima last April. 1,000 kilometers. 50,000 becquerels alongside of children where they walk on the street each day back and forth to school. These are considered staggering numbers, but another study showed 29 million becquerels a kilogram, which you got to multiply it by 64 or so to get a square meter where they're going to stand up and swing their arms. Nuclear radiation, by the way, is the most carcinogenic thing that exists. So why is the majority of nuclear power plants surrounded by farms? Is that a legitimate question? Why are you doing that for? What's wrong with your heads? How did that become a good idea? Smalling mascot asked Fukushima kids to gargle to stay safe from radiation. Gargling won't protect you from radiation. More like, what kind of scumbag came up with that routine? It's like saying all the radiation is contained to the fuel pools. It's not hemorrhaging radiation to all these farms. And it doesn't stop at the farms. It blows worldwide. But the farms are going to get brutal doses. And that's how to keep the numbers down around the plant. Because the food is regularly shipped out, right? And regularly watered. And regularly, everything is downhill to the ocean. Translocation of 125, 75, 36 to wheat. Right. So, they have so many studies, to say. They know this is criminal, what they're doing there. And there's probably nowhere else on the planet is going to tell you that the fuel pools The reason radiation is dangerous is because it's still splitting atoms. It's a perpetual machine. It's the only perpetual machine that we know about on the entire planet. And I apologize because I get frustrated so often about this subject. And there's nothing I can do about it. Have a poll, tell the story, try to get that anxiety out of me each day. And that's why you see me doing this so often. It's because it makes me so anxious. It's so... it's such a stupid thing to be doing to the planet, and the industry's got 80 years jump on us. But we have to put our foot down sometime, and now's the time. Cesium-137 immediately damaged the heart muscle, so you can die of heart attacks, and you will, of course, if you're bioaccumulating it or eating it or breathing it constantly. You're going to see a huge spike in younger people dropping dead of heart attacks, and that's what we're seeing worldwide. But now our safe are for sure unequivocal when we started looking at all the nuclear plants and realized they all got this one thing in common. They're surrounded by farms. Or they're in a city and surrounded by humans. Which is... So, like, when you look at a picture like this, it's hard to wrap your mind around that humans fill the bags up. So this is the contempt the industry has. And there was the homeless and destitute, not academics. You know, I had a poll last night. Should nuclear students go to work at Fukushima? And that's a great idea if they're going to get into the industry. And, you know, it's not really about that, is it? The poll is about having the question and framing the question of, you know, sometimes I'll say, should nuclear scientists go to Fukushima nuclear meltdown someday? That's the equivalent to saying, should nuclear students go to Fukushima and give the homeless a day off sometime? We know it's not going to happen. And then I'm not going to try to defend the nuclear students because they're in the nuclear industry. The minute they went and started going to university, they're officially in the nuclear industry. That's where they're headed for. There's lots of jobs. And all they got to do, and their professor is going to fill them full of propaganda, and they're not going to know it's propaganda. And they're not going to get a job unless they pass the propaganda tests. What do you say to people when you ask about radiation? Well, you say it's like a banana. That's okay, you got an A. So would you shop in the nuclear wasteland? Would you eat food from a field surrounded by 1-ton bags of radiation? And in a normal world, the answer is absolutely, positively, unequivocally, forget about it. It's never going to happen. A better chance of seeing 2 Danas than you are of get me to do that. Attaining net zero carbon emissions. Every time I heard the word net zero carbon emissions was a paper by Miles Allen, who got a job at Oxford now. Nice cushy job promoting that agenda. He wrote a paper about net zero carbon. And the United Nations took it and blew it completely out of proportion. Nuclear is the global warming. 80 years of nuclear releases. And it never goes away. It's pulsing energy every second. You keep adding to the pile. What do you really think is going to happen? It kills all the bacteria and fungus in the forest so they don't break down. And that way when you get a lightning strike, all the litter and foliage ignites because it doesn't break down because there's no bacteria, there's no fungus, there's no biodiversity to cause it to break down. So it's all just sitting there ready to... Oh, you get into the industry. What was the question? What was the statement? Attaining net zero emissions by 2050 requires significant new nuclear power generation to come online in the coming decades. Decades. Renewables are going to just crush you by 2026. By 2027, 2028, anybody who mentioned renewable is going to get spit at, or nuclear is going to get spit at. So you're claiming that you can't get there without nuclear is lies, lies, and oh my God, more lies. And that's what this person tells on a regular basis. He's the ex-IAEA. Forest Service discovers mass fir death tree die-off in Oregon, which is up on the coastline where massive radioactive fallout, massive die-offs happened for years. And that whole coastline was die-offs of fir trees. 1,500 square miles, 1.23 million acres died off. Because there's no bacteria, there's no fungus. And you get higher temperatures because you can't, water doesn't pull up anywhere because you got rid of the bacteria and the fungus, and there's no, like, you know how you would go into a forest in the middle of summer and you would get into the shade and you find all kinds of rotting things that were, was a perfect a community, right, to break down the wood. Now you go in there and everything's dry as a bone, even in the deepest, darkest areas of the forest, because we killed the bacteria and the fungus from the radioactive fallout under climate change. And so I'm not going to do it to you yet. 11,000 children killed or maimed, another 2.2 million malnourished due to the endless war in Yemen, which is all, and it's all funded, and Yemen's right there. Right? Saudi's right in the center of the great biggest piece of land. And yet Yemen, that whole area has been torn apart by the industry for a very long time. And then UNICEF is United Nations. And United Nations is they're going to be feeding them all the GMO they couldn't sell. That's what they're going to give the starving victims, if they give them anything at all. UNICEF is not who people think they are. That's United Nations. That's the military-industrial complex, for goodness sakes. Deadly prefectures. Massive radioactive waste buildup in Tokyo suburbs. Massive radioactive waste buildup in Tokyo suburbs. So eating food from bionuclear disease factories in no-go zones that are completely evacuated, surrounded by one-ton bags of radiation, probably a silly idea. Says nobody, apparently, for some reason. And you know how many people has this conversation? Nobody. I keep the conversation alive in desperation and I'm heartbroken by what is going on. And because to me, I know that that's going to somebody's house. I'm sorry, millions and millions of people's houses. Tokyo officials blast parents who want kids to avoid ingesting radioactivity at school. It's important to share the pain, said the monster, the pro-nuclear monster. Surge in radioactive cesium shuts down incinerators near Tokyo. There was one spot where 4 employees at the incinerator had heart attacks. Had to get ambulances to take them to the hospital and get resuscitated. This is the nuclear industry, and that's you. Or that's planet Earth. That's everybody that watches the Hulk and Spider-Man and Superman and the Wolverine. They're, the Simpsons and the pro-nuclear stupid movies and documentaries. That's what they're doing. They're turning them into suicidal idiots. And that's people in the nuclear industry, too. That's everybody in the nuclear industry who's following that carrot, and they'll jump off a cliff if the nuclear industry convinces them. That's part of their job. Retiring fossil fuel plants will free 2.6 million cubic meters of fresh water yearly. 2.6 billion cubic meters. Well, there's 1.4 billion. There's 48,000 tons an hour. Let me do it. I'll bring up the calculator here in a second. Hang on. I just want to see what these numbers look like for a single nuclear reactor. Oh, for a single nuclear reactor. So it's 4,800 tons. Tons, tons, per minute. And there's 1,440 minutes in a day. So that's one day. So let's multiply that by 365 days. That's just a single reactor. 365 days is 2.5 billion a year tons. So 2.5 billion a year tons per nuclear plant. And retiring fossil fuel power plants will free 2.6 billion cubic meters of fresh water yearly. And it's not going to be radioactive from those facilities, hopefully. Nuclear is the most water intensive, by the way. Water rates sometimes stay with the site, so net water availability depends on what replaces the fossil fuel power plant. When a power plant shuts down, either from policy changes or degradation, the water isn't necessarily released back to the rivers, surface storage, or groundwater. If a more water-intensive use like nuclear power plants replaces a coal plant, for example, no water may be freed up at all. And now, like a typical nuclear plant would have 8 reactors. So multiply 8 by 2.5 billion tons is how much water they're going to need a year. But anyway, if it's replaced with something less water intensive like renewables, then that water goes downstream and feeds all kinds of life and ecosystems and estuaries and everything else. City seeking spending authority for Horizon Center Power. Horizon Center Power is going to be a fuel company, a nuclear fuel company. And they got to spend millions of dollars, and they need water, and they need a lot of water. So that's two good stories together, right? And that kind of fuel they're talking about is mixed oxide fuel, by the way. That they don't talk about it having any licenses, but apparently they must. B-2 damaged an emergency landing. How many stupid military industrial complex. Prisoners of the Ghostland is the underrated Nicolas Cage movie you should watch. Why did I put that there? I can't remember. It is a Japanese nuclear wasteland, the result of a furious crash between a prison bus and a shipment of nuclear waste that somehow initiated nuclear explosion and widespread fires. And apparently Nicolas Cage, because the prison was in prison and the prison bus got in a collision with a shipment of nuclear waste, like the Hulk and Spider-Man, how Superman and everybody else is created by the industry. Now we got Nicolas Cage. Yay. The biggest mistake changed Watchmen's history forever. He was murdered by Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan was created during the Manhattan Project. And he's like a mad doctor / Spider-Man. From a false flag mass murder, a secret, and keep the world from nuclear war. So like they're creating a lot of comic books directed at children to suck them into the nuclear. This is unbelievably coordination. So we got a poll tonight. I got a poll every night. Tonight's a great poll. Hold on to your hats. Should the sale of radioactive food grown around nuclear disease factories, also known as nuclear power plants, be banned worldwide? We got a stunning 35 votes and 97% yes. Let's keep rolling. I got a lot of stories. 10 million becquerels a kilogram of cesium in Minnesota soil sample. They're shipping a lot of food out of there now. It's absurd. The whole story is absurd. Possible 20 million becquerels a kilogram of cesium. Many times more radioactive than local official sample. And this is far away from the disease factories on top of that. Radioactivity of 6.15 million becquerels a square meter detected 60 kilometers from the meltdown. So growing food around this area is like, every time I see the picture of them growing food alongside a 1 ton, and there's quite a few of these pictures where they're growing food alongside a 1 ton and harvesting it. I can't rationalize that one, see? So, like, I would never believe that was possible. Ever. That's normal. That's nothing compared to what they're actually up to. That doesn't concern you. That's not the most important thing to learn about and understand. And I'd like to hear a psychiatrist give me his opinion of why they done that, how that decision came about, right? You know, like, how did they pick that parcel of land? How come, you see all these 1 ton bags? How does that work, right? You're going to grow food there, but it's surrounded by 1 ton bags of radiation. Yeah, but that piece is pretty good. Look at it. They said the radiation's in the bag. What about, why is there so many bags? Well, there was a lot of radiation. Now it's in the bags. And there's people out there, obviously, that are so sadistic. It's just, where's the IAEA walking around there saying, if you did have a video of the IAEA and you forced them to go there at gunpoint, you know what they would say to you? Well, I can't smell any radiation. Ask Dr. Scott, Thyroid Awareness Month deserves recognition, I'll say. They're not burying that for something to do. An underactive thyroid gland can contribute to obesity. Japan's obesity rate raised 50% in the first 12 months after Fukushima. Not raised, but exploded, I should say. More than 30 million Americans may suffer from thyroid disorders. And at least half the cases remain undiagnosed. So your thyroid sucks up all kinds of gamma, not just iodine 131, 132, iodine 133, iodine 129, and all kinds of gammas. And so what happens, if it doesn't go in the thyroid, it goes somewhere else, muscles, the organs and stuff like that, into your meaty parts of your body and sequesters and starts wrecking all your DNA and chromosome every second for the rest of your life. But the stuff that sequesters in the thyroid, a lot of it, if there's a lot of it, and there was after Fukushima, there was absurd amount, like 220 million atoms per liter of iodine 129. So all the insects and birds and small mammals and animals and big animals and humans and kids and whales and elephants and dinosaurs, their thyroid glands are saturated. And what happened was it mutated they started producing mutated hormones, radioactive hormones. And not only that, obviously, right? But now the hormones controls all the function of all the birds and insects and spiders and everything else in humans. Entire body function is dictated by the hormones, which are produced by the thyroid. So it was also sequestering in your bones, particularly children and young animals and young pets and young whatever, any kind of species. What it does in their bones is it mutates their stem cells, all of them. And so they become very dysfunctional and sterilizes them. And the increments over a decade, the majority of them disappeared. Potassium iodate tablets block thyroid uptake. Block some. You have to be taking a lot of it before the accident happens. And if you take a lot of it, then it's going to hurt your body. You can't take the heavy potassium iodine tablets without actually causing harm too, apparently. An increase in thyroid cancers occurs after the Chernobyl event. Well, there's not just thyroid, there's 1,800 illnesses. And so we're going to move on to the next story because I'm not going to cover all the lies tonight. Tactical nuclear weapons are deployed in Ukraine. Iodine pills might be discussed. Really? The World Health Organization raised the limit, or the Japanese raised the limit 70 times higher than the World Health Organization, which of course is the United Nations. Iodized salt is mandated in 122 countries to prevent congenital iodine deficiency syndromes. Is mandated in 122 countries because of endless nuclear war from the emissions from reactors and fuel pools and dumping and nuclear meltdowns and nuclear weapons for decades and decades. Is the actual reason. Restart after maintenance. Well, it wasn't maintenance. It was shut down because they had an earthquake that damaged it. And it took them 5 years, not 4. To fix it. They just fired it back up. Nice try, though. Nuclear engineering. These are disgusting, despicable, revolting parasites. This is nuclear lobbyists. They won't put their name on their articles. Located in Australia and United Kingdom. I bet you the Australia is the real bastards, isn't they? The nuclear industry in Australia is what I'm talking about. They're filthy animals. Actually, animals are pretty cool. These are filthy scumbags. Hinkley Point C nuclear reactor is the first to be built in 30 years. Well, it's not like the British built it. The French built it. Well, they're building some of it. They're using enough. It's the biggest man-made construction project ever on Earth. Nuclear industry, very powerful in the United Kingdom. It's very evil on top of that. They're full of shit on top of that. They're not going to come in on schedule, and by the time they get halfway through renewables, they'll have to abandon it. But they can steal a lot of money in between, right? And they don't have it yet on top of that. Why are people afraid of nuclear energy, nuclear fears? Well, because the industry is full of degenerate scum with a 80-year legacy of being degenerate scums with no exceptions. EDF announces new delay. Today they announced it'll be at least summer before they get some of their reactors fixed, which I've been telling everybody all along. But because they're on the stock market, it's considered polite to tell lies, apparently. Costs are going to increase with another $500 million. As if anybody's surprised. There's going to be another long delay, another bullshit story right around tomorrow or the next day. It never stops with them. United Nations condemns Twitter decision to suspend journalist account. He suspended the journalist account was just a few of them. And they had DOSed him. They had posted his whereabouts in real time. Not because they adore him and they want fans to go there. No, to incite some kind of violence against him. It was done with malicious intent. So he closed the account. I mean, by the way, guess who owns Twitter? It's the same guy who just closed their accounts because his family's at stake too. It was a low thing to do to somebody, is to DOS him with so many enemies and with his family in tow. It's despicable. It's not journalism. It's being scum. News of the past. Design change in Prairie Island nuclear plant requested. That was basically, they brought up some stories from the archives, and which is good, right? So I kept that archive. I put that in one of my folders. And you can go back through the archive of the 60s and 70s and 80s stories. Like that's real horror book material, because you see how they just disregarded any humanity whatsoever. They treated the people like they were actual human guinea pigs. EDF system maintenance work may take 30 days longer, and now they're saying till the summer. Every day there's another lie coming out of these guys. Military spending bill would give Los Alamos National Laboratory a record budget. We covered that last week, but it's still cycling, which is fine. So Los Angeles, their budget is 5 times whatever its maximum was. Because this was announced before the bullshit fusion story came out. And that was about driving up stocks. And guess what it done? Stocks went nuts on something that's not going to exist for at least 50 years. So they robbed a whole bunch of unsuspecting pensioners of their life savings. U.S. Senate has approved $858 billion in militaries. Yeah, we covered that last night, by the way. Some of the money's going to the Space Rapid Capabilities Office. They need to expand all over the place. 1,440 trains. There was 1,000 of them that shifted in March of this year, a couple of days after the anniversary. They had a serious, massive earthquake, right? That's a little bit small for my eyes. Well, hang on. It took a month to fully open the train lines, which measured, because the earthquake measured an upper 6, the second highest level. So an upper 6, like a 6.6, 6.5. So so if you divide their scale, which is 7, into the international scale, which is 1.428, 1.43, it is a 6.7, which is what they were talking about, upper 6, is a 9.0 to 9.5 or 9.6 earthquake. And it shifted 1,000 of those viaducts. It done damage to 5,000 schools or something, but it had to go right past the fragile nuclear plants where it done absolutely no damage whatsoever, Dana. A bloody miracle, yeah? It's a disgusting industry. It's a disgusting, despicable, hateful industry. Its entire legacy is predicated upon deceit and dishonesty and deception. Hold the nuclear fusion hype. Its practical use as an energy source may be decades away. Not maybe, it is. Researching aged metal harvest from decommissioned nuclear plants. So the minute I saw that, I was thinking, right, they're going to make kids' toys out of it and get it back on the market. But what they're trying to do is they're looking at the Wigner effect. I don't know why those couple got blotches on their faces, but it looks appropriate to me. He's got, buddy there, third guy over, got it on his cheeks. Oh, that's the projector in the background. Oh, I see. So they're celebrating it. It can support the management of plant aging. So they're looking at the Wigner effect, where the metal gets fatigued and then brittled from gamma shines, X-rays, and neutron bursts. Really, you haven't looked at that before, or is it you just got a whole bunch of money thrown at you? That's which is really what we're talking about, right? Shell and NuScale are going to use nuclear power to make hydrogen. In your dreams. First off, and Shell, which is the oil company, of course, wants a piece of the pie. So you can see how powerful NuScale is, where it brings in these big clients. First off, NuScale got no fuel, let alone reactors. And it looks, the rules and regulations for the reactors are set at as low as radiation release to be as low as reasonably achievable, which means no releases. And they're freaking out. They said, well, we can't build a reactor if we can't release it into the environment. And they're not going to run out of farmland anytime soon, so they're all frigged up. You know what I mean? Propaganda is fun. BV and Thorncon joined forces to develop a small modular reactor-powered barge. First off, it's not going to happen. You don't have the fuel. Not only that, there's no need. By the time they bring it to fruition, it's quite a long time down the road. And by then, renewables will be the better option. And by infinitely cheaper. It's already a better option. They can do geothermal is what I'm saying, right? Anywhere. You just got to have the will to dig deep enough. And that place might be perfect, who knows? France could avoid power cuts with more nuclear reactors. Unfortunately, a lot of them are not going to be online till the summer. So stop your whining. You put all your eggs in one basket. You're a bunch of degenerate scum in the industry. What did you think was going to happen? Not only that, to let the reactors become old and decrepit and brittled without building something to replace it, they wait till the very last second and say we're going to have a nuclear renaissance. But you don't even have enough water. Right? They got no glaciers anymore because of Fukushima. Norfolk's officer fired for grossly offensive WhatsApp group. There were 6 of them got fired. And these were bigoted and prejudiced and biased and racist scum. And so they fired 6 of them because they didn't want a black eye in the police force. So they threw them under the bus and then started up a private group where that won't happen again, get caught. So we got a poll. Should the sale of degenerate radioactive food grown around disease factories that are also known as nuclear power plants be banned worldwide? And we got a stunning 2 people voted no, which is what the hell. And everybody else correctly voted yes, it should be a crime and it should be illegal and they should ban the food from these disease factories. High level of radioactive material found in Tokyo, 170,000 becquerels a kilogram per kilogram in the sewage, in the excrement, in the slag. These are catastrophic numbers. So Tokyo made a fatal mistake by not evacuating. Fallout from Fukushima causing problems 180 kilometers away. It all became no good. Contaminated wild vegetables, fish, wild game. Well, that's forever. The environment, the species will disappear within a short period because of it and not coming back. Britain risks losing phenomenal levels of nuclear expertise as U.S. advantage revealed. So Britain, first off, doesn't have very much expertise. They're getting France to build their reactors, for freak's sakes, unless more private funding is forthcoming. Oh, it's a stick-up. The heads of a leading rocket firm warned last night. Oh, that's so sad. Wow, poor baby, don't get funding. Well, you're nothing but a waste of money. You guys are nothing but disease factories. You don't deserve it. You parasite. Oppenheimer wrongly stripped of security clearance, says anybody with a brain, long before the U.S. says it. Like, there's a lot of this disgusting creature, Jennifer Granholm, a-hole, the Energy Secretary for the U.S. Department of Scum. The Biden administration reversed a decades-old decision to revoke the security clearance of a dead guy known as Robert Oppenheimer. This was intentional deceit. What they done to him. This was sedition, where they wanted to get in control of the whole operation. They just had to get rid of the guy who made it all happen so they can have all the glory. That's the nuclear industry, see? That's the oldest story, and it's today's biggest story in the nuclear industry, is backstabbing scumbags. India's first 500 megawatt, which is half a gigawatt, fast reactor gets delayed by 2 more years. Thank goodness. That's a breeder reactor, which means they can produce more than they use, and they can take it to fuel other similar reactors, folks. So this is going to be a terrible disease factory on our planet. And India's legacy when it comes to nuclear, they charged 9,000 people with sedition in 2013 who were protesting a nuclear plant. Beat them up with sticks, the police did, and screwed them over for the last decade because they kept them in court over and over and over with no trial. Just keep dragging them in and screwing them over. So they can't get a job, they can't go to a school, universities, right? They can't, they're under siege from the industry. And that's how the nuclear industry works in India. It wrecks everything and everybody except for the inbreeds themselves. The state of Chernobyl today. Well, they built this, the international community paid for it, not Russia. Russia too busy spending its money on nuclear and stupid shit. They built, Russia never goes there, of course, unless they're going to invade. They built this so-called sarcophagus, and it's on tracks, and then they slid it over the reactors because it's too dangerous to build it over it, right? There's too many dead people. You can't go inside of it once you close it. There's an outer piece that's very deceiving. You can go inside of that, and that's the way it was built, right? But you can't go inside the reactors, and that's why he built it. But the industry is so unbelievable, such a betrayal, everything in the nuclear industry. ONR issues Sellafield enforcement notice after a fire inspection. They didn't have, and look, you can see this is Sellafield. It used to be called Windscale. They changed the name in the 80s because of the crimes they committed in the 50s to get rid of that legacy. And so now it's called Sellafield. And that the fire alarms weren't hooked up or were dysfunctional. Yeah, because radiation wrecks electronics. And the only way you can get it to work is you got to get rid of all the radiation. And Sellafield is the final home. It's unbelievable how total disregard for planet Earth in the future is how you look at the nuclear industry. It's complete selfish and vicious and hateful disregard of all species and humanity's future. In the Himalayas, two nuclear powers fight each other with sticks, India and Pakistan. Right, that's a hot zone on the borders, and it boils over sometimes, and they kill a few of each other. But it's regular for them on the border duty to cross in each other's territory, and they beat the shit out of each other with sticks. For like 60 years they've been doing this. The long journey to the Higgs boson and beyond, the power of collaboration, the power of robbery of a sovereign nations. And these people have spent their whole life there doing nothing. You have 5,000 scientists working there, top wages, all the benefits. And it's unbelievable. They live in absolute luxury. And they're looking for particles so they can make even bigger and more dangerous bombs, stuff that can crack the moon in two or something, right? And they're the last people you want to give that information to. We don't want that kind of information available to the current generations of scum for at least another 1,000 generations. Wyoming nuclear plant delayed tentative start date pushed to 2030 because they can't get their hands on fuel, which is Bill Gates. Now, that mine, or that coal mine that they're going to build a nuclear power small modular reactor, Fable reactor at, first off, doesn't shut down until 2025. It's going to be a couple of years before they can take over, which is 2027 or something. So then they said they're going to have a reactor by 2028, but it doesn't work that way. And the rules and regulations, they don't have the licensing or the application into the non-regulatory agencies, which is like 1,000 pieces of paper. Or, I'm sorry, 1 million pieces of paper for a reactor, basically. And so, how, that's got to be investigated, and they got to make design changes, re-engineer lots of it. You're talking a decade here. So renewables are literally going to curb stomp them long before that. By 2026, 2027 will be absurd advantage for the renewables. 2028 is going to blow everything away. Everybody's coming on board. By 2029, 2030, geothermal is going to ignite 50%, in the near future of all energy will be geothermal. I would imagine once we crack the technology to drill deep enough, we can put it anywhere. And then we can replace all gas, all coal, nuclear directly. Just build your geothermal and then turn off one, turn on the geothermal when it's ready. And you can rebuild on that same spot for 1 million years. Keep all the old infrastructure, the transmission lines, the whole operation, and just switch off one, turn on geothermal. Green energy fails. Europe has to rely on coal power. That was a really dishonest story. That was an incredibly despicable, deceptive story, where they made nuclear wind, or wind and solar, because they basically claim there's no storage. There's around 20 solutions to the storage on top of that. So it's a really deceptive and deceitful and dishonest thing to do. Nuclear norms under attack. 60 years after the Cuban Missile Crisis brought the world to the brink of a nuclear holocaust, the international community is still struggling to contain the malign manifestation of the atom while exploiting its benign uses of nuclear power generation. There's nothing benign about nuclear power generation, because the fuel pools are hemorrhaging isotopes perpetually into the environment at the same rate as you would to boil water from millions of homes, because each year you're putting more fuel in the pool, right? So each year you make more emissions into the environment, into the ecosystem, that never disappears. There's always pulsing energy every second for millions of years, and you keep adding worldwide from 1,000 fuel pools to that. You really think that's not going to blow up in the ecosystem's face? Nuclear power names Karen for an intern chief operating officer. Great, we got a Karen in charge as the chief operating officer. And if you look at her pedigree, she's up there with, she makes Ted Bundy look like a little schoolyard bully. Uranium hits a 4-month low. Of course it hit a 4-month low. Canada had a fake stock market company created 2 years ago. I can't remember the name of it. Oops. Why the hell can't I remember? My God, is my brain that shot? I've only been at this for an hour and 20 minutes. Giggity. Sprout. That's the name of the company, Sprout. You just got to break your concentration when you can't remember something, right? If you stay there trying to it doesn't work. But the minute you cycle off, then the brain stops farting. Uranium hit a 4-month low. Like for the last almost 12 years, uranium stocks went right down and bottom flattened out and flatlined. There's zero possibilities of making a profit off it. And it stayed there. And there was these fake rallies, particularly with Globe and Mail out of British Columbia, Canada, probably the biggest media in Canada. 3 times a week they would promote uranium stocks. Buy, and it was all kinds of hype, and they had reporters pushing it and pumping it. There was all kinds of articles every second day or so wrote about it, and they were promoting it to companies that would never sold a stock again if Globe and Mail didn't do that. And people were robbed. Millions of people were robbed of their life savings so that the nuclear industry can hold its breath for another little while. Uranium hits 4-month low as France sees corrosion problems drag down the nuclear production. Yeah, if a nuke plant goes offline anywhere worldwide, stock market freaks out and starts selling. Well, the ones in the know, right? Yeah, it's a disgusting industry, particularly the stock market side of the nuclear industry. They're real degenerates. We covered that story earlier. Quad knockers failed the world in 2022. That was a few days ago, and I can't actually remember that story at all. Russia invaded Ukraine, and what came hot on the heels were food and energy shortage. Yeah, caused by embargoes from United Nations countries, 195 countries, enforced inflation in their own country to punish Russia by using embargoes against Russia's commodities couldn't be replaced anywhere else, the quantity of them, and quality in the case of the nuclear industry. Russia just said, okay, well, we'll just sell it to somebody else, and they did. Russia's never got hurt a single time by the sanctions. Only the countries that create the sanctions are hurt. And they're hurt terribly what you got done to the entire planet. And there's not an accident. There are more than 100 armed conflicts in the world today. What made Ukraine so important that we sanctioned the only country where we can get our hands on large quantities of the commodities, gas, oil, coal, that was necessary, and we're the part of the function of the country. That's the way it's been going on for decades. And then just, you can't replace it, you shouldn't be putting embargoes against it. Well, NATO did nothing to end the war in Ukraine. No, because that's a world war the minute you step in. It ensured it kept on dragging. No, it supplied endless weapons to Ukraine and people to teach them how to use them. And we're talking anti-aircraft missiles, self-throwaway shoulder-launched missiles. We're talking absurd numbers, by the way, and anti-tank missiles that you can just launch with your shoulder and throw away the case. Canada's sent down probably 100,000 over the last 9 months or so. And 25 of the NATO countries are doing the same thing. There are more than 100 armed conflicts in the world today, so why don't we put in embargoes against all of these countries? Well, because this was a setup right after COVID, right, to drive the price of oil through the roof, which is everybody's dependent upon. And then now they can't buy food, then at the same time drive up the price of food and starve everybody. So you already got them 2 years of destruction from the coronavirus, and then now you got them in the poverty. They can't afford to buy gas to go anywhere anyway because of the embargoes by United Nations. United Nations is not even supposed to exist. They're the last organization that should be calling the shots. They're calling the shots. They're telling the world, like, you can't criticize COVID because of United Nations. Social media takes down your site because United Nations says to social media, we can't have any dissenting voices. We're not allowed, you can't have a debate. You got to read the script only. And so you no longer have any sovereignty if you're part of United Nations 195 involuntarily slaved in countries. There are more than 100 conflicts in the world today, so why is Russia conflict? Russia's also in Syria, you know. No one's even opened their fucking mouths about it. New study shows Ford government here in Canada, the Ontario government, and like what he done for the truckers' protest, the transport truckers' protest, about 10 months ago, Ford in Ontario, the mayor of Ontario, He started trying to enact laws to take people's licenses away from them, to tow their vehicles away, to take away their ability for insurance for these things, and to put them in jail for up to a year if they didn't stop protesting. And protesting doesn't work if you don't cause disruption. That's the idea of the protest. The system is so corrupt. But for Ford to do what he done, and now he's out there pumping nuclear industry, it's really something, right? He'll do anything to destroy the country, and he's in a position to do it. He's completely remorseless, and he's not honest a single time about this. Sweden touts nuclear energy. 2017, Sweden said they weren't going to touch it. And so they just put someone new in a position of authority. He's only been there for a couple of weeks, and now he's pumping nuclear. We see this over and over worldwide over the last couple of years, by the way. Different countries, the same thing happened to them. Key tool to reduce dependence on Russia. You can get it from somewhere else. You don't have to get it from Russia, moron. Nuclear policy not for candidates to debate Taipei times Taiwan. Nuclear policy is not up for debates for the candidates. Well, it's not illegal to poison you. Only the non-regulatory agency has that authority. So it's no surprise that a politician is not allowed to have a debate, is it? Thank God for the free countries like Taiwan, is all I can say. Get your Fukushima radioactive death food. Only $1 extra per pound. We got a poll tonight. Should the sale of disease factories, nuclear power plants, radioactive food grown around nuclear power plants, which I call disease factories because they're hemorrhaging radiation, be banned worldwide? And of course it should be. 100% unequivocal. Unassailably, it should be. I mean, and how come I only got 22 people on my show? How does that work? This is the same show we've been doing 5 days a week for years and years and years. And anybody that looks at nuclear, they're hardcore. There's no other competitor. There's no other competition on the planet. Period. Nothing. And the nuclear industry doesn't have a single person that the world would respect. That everybody would say, well, actually, they're a pretty nice person. Or at least they're honest or something like that. They don't have a single person. And that's why they don't have a nuclear talk show or a nuclear program worldwide anywhere. And the ones that are out there doing it on their own, these are degenerate, despicable, disgusting, perpetual liars. Like Rod Adams, for instance. What a friggin' freak show he was. And he was a persistent man. 311 fallout figures released over 4 million becquerels a square meter in a major city. And it didn't come from the cesium-137 or the iodine-131. No, it was curium and plutonium and americium and neptunium and strontium. High levels of radioactivity found extensively. Japan says the air 150 kilometers from the Fukushima plant is as radioactive as the areas close to the multiple nuclear fuel pools and reactor meltdowns. Because the fuel pools in 4 buildings, there's 8 of them melted down. And they got decades of reactor cores that were highly volatile, which is why they keep them in deep underwater and fuel pools. Rolls-Royce is building a nuclear micro-reactor that company could. Listen, it's nonsense. They don't even have a design in. They're trying to raise money, and money was thrown at them. They won't throw their own money into it. They just want you to throw money at them so they can have money, not so they can do the job, because they're not going to do the job. And this one was going to be for space, space on the moon. Australia Defense was urged to consider ordering the new U.S. stealth bombers. Australia is going to have stealth bombers and nuclear submarines. I can't picture Australia picking a war with anybody on the planet. Except for Canada, I suppose. Canada's got 3 submarines. They're all at the West Edmonton Mall. Chris Bowen defends government's energy deal and attacks the gas industry. This is Australia. Yeah, right. Sorry, a little confused here. Said he didn't find complaints from the Australian Petroleum Production Exploration Association convincing in the slightest. I can't remember this short. Oh, this was about putting a cap on profits because of the artificial inflation, right, of fuel prices. They wanted to put a cap on the massive prices that oil companies are just randomly charging people. And then any money made after the cap that they're going to get, like the numbers can still go up. It's just there's a cap on how much they can make. And the money left over was going to be pulled up and given back to the Australians to help them with the high prices of gas and oil. Because that makes no sense at all, right? Well, we're talking about Australia, so don't worry about it. President Biden announces National Quantum Initiative, Advisory Committee, appointments, and other positions. And it's a huge list. So we're not going to be able to cover all of that. There's enough doctors to make your eyes water. And so there goes the rest of your future. They're going to pay for all of them. Crumbling nuclear plant, which is the Philippines. It was finished in 1986 when Chernobyl happened. So they decided not to fuel it. And 6 administrations have done the same thing, right? But now the nuclear industry got a player in there who's really complacent and stupid, actually. And they're hoping now to get it up and running. Because that's what the nuclear industry... It took them 43 years to get Watts Bar up and running. Nuclear industry never gave up a single time. No, we'll get you more money from the taxpayers. We'll get you up and running. Don't you worry. Our silence, the wrong side of climate change. Our silence. Like every time you hear the word climate change, you need to be worried. Because the industry is insane. But climate change can be unequivocally traced back to decades and decades of radiation fallout. This particular one is a continuous plume covering the entire planet in 19 days at this level right here, 468 hours. I must have had it in, didn't I? Do it again. Come on, Danny, get it together, dude. Let's see if he gets lucky here. Maybe not. Maybe so. Maybe not. Maybe. Come on, computer. Stop messing with me. One more try. Give me one more try. Hang on. If I look down at the keyboard, maybe I'll actually get it right this time. Excellent. Come on, computer. Bring it up. Come on. Maybe I'll look away. Maybe it gets shy because I'm staring at it. What's up, dog? Don't leave me hanging. Certain keywords for pumping. Oh, well, I'll abandon that ploy. There's got to be another way to tell the story. There always is another way. How about this one here? In Europe, this was an advertisement they were running on TV that if you didn't do your part for the climate, then you should be executed.
Right, just want to check on that 10-10 thing. Had some brilliant ideas from lots of you how the firm can cut down emissions by 10%. Just quick show of hands, everyone who wants to get involved. Great, that's nearly everybody. And yeah, just for the record, no pressure. Those who aren't quite convinced about it yet. Cool, it's no problem. Your choice. Okay, so those of you planning something here or at home should probably get working on it. Oh, gorgeous. Those of you who aren't... Excellent. Have a great weekend, everyone.
So, they were teaching kids to attack the other kids who wasn't willing to do something, or their parents, or brothers or sisters, because this is what it was targeted at. And it was acceptable to go on with your life like it's no big deal. And here's another one.
Right, kids, just before you go, there's a brilliant idea in the air that I'd like to run by you. Now, it's called 10-10. The idea is everyone starts cutting their carbon emissions by 10%, thus keeping the planet safe for everyone, eventually. Now, this hasn't got to be a huge thing, but I would love it if you and your families would think about doing something.
What sort of thing, miss?
Well, like getting your dad to insulate the loft, or taking your next holiday by train instead of flying, or buying energy-saving light bulbs.
We're thinking of using our car less. I'm going to cycle to school.
That's fantastic, Jemima. Now, no pressure at all, but it'd be great to get a sense of how many of you might do this. Just a rough percentage. That's fantastic. And those not? Philip and Tracy. That's fine, that's absolutely fine. Your own choice. Okay, class, thank you so much for today, and I will see you all tomorrow. Oh, just before you go, I just need to press this little button here. Now, everybody, please remember to read chapters 5 and 6 on volcanoes and glaciation. Except for Philip and Tracy, of course.
This was on TV in 31 countries in Europe. Let me see if I can remember it. And this one. Oh yeah, let's go backwards. Okay, so there's two more. I might as well play them while we're here. What's just short? Here we go.
Well, hello everyone. It's great to be back here at Spurs. So many happy memories for me. Anyway, tell me something. What is this 10-10 thing the club is doing?
Well, it means that we're trying to cut our carbon emissions by 10% this year, and Tottenham Hotspur Football Club was the first to sign up.
We've changed the floodlights at White Hart Lane, so they're low energy. Lots of our fans are coming to matches on buses, trains, bikes and stuff, rather than coming by car.
I see. Whatever, I wouldn't do it. It seems like distraction from football to me.
That's just fine, David. You don't have to join in, just ignore it. No pressure. Right, lads, let's do some penalties.
10-10. Hundreds of thousands of people, schools, businesses, hospitals, movie stars, knitting circles, scout troops, presidents and governments, all tackling climate change in more than 40 countries. Care to join us? No pressure.
Was that okay?
Sounded great to me. Thanks,
okay.
Gillian.
Happy to help.
So what are you thinking of doing for 10-10 yourself?
What, are you kidding me?
I thought that by doing this voiceover, that was my contribution.
Right. No, absolutely. No pressure.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Jesus.
Or else, so that's a metaphor, right? That anybody's not going to participate are scumbags, and that's the extreme. But this is on TV in 30-something countries. Imagine how many children had nightmares, and how many zealots from the industry itself bought into it and vilified and demonized, and it's meant to desensitize the population, particularly children, though. And that was played for years. Our silence. Well, Fukushima is the epitome of your silence. And last but not least, the U.S. Department of Energy selects partners to gauge communities on nuclear energy. Engage communities. To American Nuclear Society gets $800,000 to connect with communities and establish opportunities, outreach opportunities. So it's a recruiting drive, and so they get all this money from the taxpayers instead of building some real solutions and doing fusion is not about energy. Fusion is about weapons. If you actually understood what kind of studies that this industry has been doing on nuclear, you're talking hundreds of thousands of different facets. And you're talking hundreds, if not thousands, of studies in each one or more. It's hard to wrap your mind around, but how many billions and trillions of animals that they tortured with radiation? When you add it up worldwide, it's just stunning. It's not a very planet-friendly industry. It can't contain its waste. It's pulsing energy. It's perpetual emissions, perpetual disease factory coming out of it. And there's up to 1,800 illnesses. And you don't have an autoimmune trigger to defend yourself from this stuff. Should a sale of radioactive food grown around nuclear plants, aka disease factories, be banned? And we have an overwhelming... I'm going to switch to the other one. And we got a 15, what have I got here? 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. Gee, I got a few there. Let's just run through some of these that I was... Today I've uploaded January and February shows, and I got to shift through everything. And whenever I'm doing stuff, I always end up coming across folders that I forgot about. This one got a lot of doozies in it. TEPCO was like a cult, brainwashed. Workers thought a missile from North Korea is what caused Fukushima explosion. Of course, Japan had ruled North Korea up until the United Nations went in there and bombed it into no existence, right? So it was like 50 years under the thumb of cruel Japan. And now for 70 years, United Nations have land, sea, and air embargoes against it. Fukushima disaster contaminated the territory of Japan, the Sea of Japan, Korea, up to 8 orders of magnitude above the global fallout background off the prefecture's coast. Cesium-137 hotspots detected in South Korea's Seoul, emitting 1,000% normal background radiation, 1,200 kilometers from the meltdowns. Japan professor, 25 times more Fukushima fallout detected in Tokyo Bay mud, than the maximum levels found in nearby lakes after the nuclear bomb explosion. Well, like it's daylight to dark we're talking about in volume. Cesium flow in rivers won't peak for another 1 to 2 years. Strontium doesn't peak for 1,000 days, and then it peaks for tens of thousands of days. NBC special: snow that would never melt began falling. Each flake bringing down cesium in a city of 30,000 people 60 kilometers from the meltdown. A snow that would never melt. Radioactive cesium reported in the Kellogg's cereal from Japan. Almost 20 becquerels a kilogram. 11 becquerels per kilogram, children start to see heart problems. Guess who eats a lot of cereal? Is government trying to contaminate every region in Japan by burning debris? Japan is burning Fukushima debris 10 miles from the Daiichi nuclear plant. Fukushima will start burning radioactive waste at 100,000 becquerels a kilogram with 1 billion pounds of radioactive material they're going to incinerate. So they grind it up and brought it all over the country and burned it at the incinerators. A reporter, 12 million yen to censor Twitter being spent by a city. That's 55,000 US dollars. Starting to burn disaster debris, radioactive. So anybody who was on Twitter got censored. Do you think Twitter gave up that kind of money? Japanese professors arrest extremely unjust. Publicly opposed burning of radioactive debris. Medical expert: hundreds are ill after Fukushima nuclear plant rubble burned in a major Japanese city. Tokyo soil so hot it should be sent to the nuclear waste dump. Canadian newspaper tried to get soil tested for radiation. Private companies, government agencies, universities all refused to get involved. Refused to get involved. In other words, they're all quite aware. Wall Street Journal: officials sharply raised, and that's the right word, sharply, and brutally would be a good word too, raised radiation levels for residents to get iodine pills after the meltdown 75 times higher. So why did they raise it 75 times higher? And who was it? And why are they so evil? Why would you do that? What kind of sickness of the mind would do something like that? Well, because you would have to move these people out. Radiation data from Seattle survey may be withheld by the feds for national security purposes. It was 450,000 counts per minute of xenon, which burns a hole through you along the sequesters in your bones. Nuclear waste being processed during an explosion in France had radioactivity 17 becquerels a kilogram, 30 times less than contaminated than what Japan considered safe to eat. So 17 becquerels a kilogram was being packaged and put into nuclear holding barrels for centuries. It was 17 becquerels a kilogram, but at the time, September 12, 2011, Japan's limit was actually 500 becquerels a kilogram, but they're only looking at cesium. They're not looking at anything else. No gammas, no alphas, no betas, no x-rays. Just cesium-137. Nothing else exists, Dana. But the biggest byproduct of radiated fuel rod is curium isotopes that need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. Press watches the Japan government dumps radioactive waste into the Tokyo Bay. Radioactive iodine found in Guma at 3 sewage plants December the 12th, which meant there was a criticality. It was an ongoing nuclear meltdown. Sharp rise in iodine-131, 220 kilometers away, by the way, at 3 Tokyo sewage plants. Highly radioactive sewage from Fukushima plant was 334,000 becquerels per kilogram of excrement. These are absurd numbers, by the way, and we've done that one. We covered those two, actually. The fog, 4,000 becquerels. That still freaks me out. That's never going to go away. That's absurd numbers. Fukushima plant will burn 55 becquerels a kilogram. Oh, I'm sorry, cubic meter is an evacuation zone pre-Fukushima at any nuclear plant. 4,000 becquerels a kilogram in fog is frightening numbers. Contamination never disappears. Fukushima plant will burn radioactive waste. The incinerators run around the clock, including building materials, clothing. 88% of the cesium radioactive ash at risk being transported away from Japan's landfill. Not at risk, but guaranteed to be washed away or blown away by the wind. It's ash, right? And before Fukushima, 100 becquerels a kilogram was nuclear waste you'd have to store for hundreds of years. Instead, it's safe to eat after Fukushima. So it's not safe, and neither is anything from Japan. That's why we have a poll. Fukushima will start burning radioactive waste 100,000 becquerels a kilogram to be incinerated. We covered that already, I think. We covered that one, massive radioactive buildup. This one I mentioned. 29,000 becquerels a square meter in soil in Tokyo after it rained. That's forever. These numbers are forever. It's 2 billion times more toxic. And like this one explains it really good. 51 minutes in was the concept is that we're generating damage which is cascading. 46 minutes. You get long-term immune dysfunction. If you inject the flu virus in the mice that were irradiated, it'll eventually kill the irradiated animals. But in normal animals, not irradiated, this isn't the case. So the immune system is unequivocally compromised. Plutonium-241 from Fukushima is 70,000 times more than the atomic bomb fallout in Japan. Large areas of the ocean contaminated by plutonium from events like Fukushima. Build up in the biosphere expected. Considerable hazard to humans. A molten fuel now particle containing special nuclear materials. There's a because you create certain isotopes with a certain mixture. When you start throwing in steel and rebar and cement and salt water, it's not going to get good. Because you're talking about the sulfur peroxide, hydrogen, buckyballs from the salt water, that's just asking for 1800 diseases when you suck that in, or insects or birds or animals or mammals. Radioactive iodine detected in 6 seaweed samples by South Korea. Of course, China, Korea, Taiwan, New Zealand, others are going to know what the fuck happened at Fukushima at some point. Unless the nuclear industry takes over, which is what happened. Xenon detected in South Korea. Over 6 million pounds of radioactive seafood was shipped back from South Korea to Japan. That was too radioactive to eat. Professor, Fukushima disaster is beyond a cover-up. Japan government thinks they can get away with tricking the masses. TEPCO can't be trusted. They're lying to the cameras. That's extremely polite, by the way. And TEPCO's not a decommission authority, right? They should never have been in charge. But if you put the nuclear industry in charge, then you got somewhere to point the blame. If you got TEPCO in charge, you never think about blaming the true reason it happened was the nuclear industry allowed it to happen. They allowed them to build it on the fault line. They allowed to build where tsunamis have a 3,000-year history. Seawater is being poisoned at a continuous rate from Fukushima. I thought it was all in the tanks, Dana. Sources of life on which our lives depend on is being corrupted. That's a polite way of saying the impossible. It's impossible to contain the radioactive wastewater leaking. It's flowing. It's not leaking. It's flowing. It's flowing. Hey, we're almost there. U.S. bans agricultural fishery products. That's 2013, by the way. That's disappointing, isn't it? 2 years late. U.S. bans agricultural fishery products from 14 prefectures. Concern over contamination is spreading to most countries around the world. They're dumping huge amounts of Fukushima contamination into the Pacific, We could have large numbers of cancer. Well, there's 1,800 other illnesses. Shinzo Abe, that's why I hate his guts so much. Officials blast Japan's government over Fukushima. Such immoral people. They let the radioactive substances flow out freely and said nothing while contaminating the ocean is just absurd. Now they're trying to cover the whole thing up. Well, you got all the universities, all the medias at their fingertips. Not very hard. Fukushima disaster is the worst case of nuclear contamination in history. Ooh, you didn't say Chernobyl. It's a crisis for all of humanity and building up to something even worse. Former diplomat, Fukushima disaster to go on almost to infinity, I'm afraid. It will never be resolved. Japan's response is failing. It's failing. It's omnicide for the rest of this planet. It's true that about 70% of Japan's territory is a radioactive wasteland. Tokyo contaminated with highly toxic radiation. Experts worry about a catastrophic impact on health. Well, 14.2% of every 100,000 live births need open heart surgery. That's just one of the manifestations. Foreign reporters find radiation levels 100 times the legal limit off Fukushima. And yes, it'll last till the end of the earth. That's the problem. They keep adding to it every day. It's been going on 80 years with no... And we're the only spot on the planet that talks about that facet of it. Cover up a massive explosion at Fukushima Reactor 3 fueled with plutonium. There was a mixed oxide fuel. I got 2 more to go. Yay. Might as well bring in the music. The entire nuclear core injected into the environment. And it wasn't from hydrogen. And finally, North America will not be safe from Fukushima radiation. The animals suddenly died on the west coast. Right after the disaster, the whole world noticed this strange phenomenon. And silly amount of work today. I feel better now that I've said and done, right? So 55 countries banned the food from 14 prefectures for almost a decade. Those countries, nuclear industry got in positions of authority and slowly started lifting all the restrictions. Sweden is the latest one, where they got pro-nuclear in that position within 2 weeks. What Boris Johnson done was really... And what the world's media done to you, constant 80 years of this deceit. 80 years. 8 decades of nothing but propaganda from the media. So if you made it this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. And we'll close the poll down. Should the sale of radioactive food grown around nuclear power plants, aka disease factories, be banned worldwide? We have 51 votes, 96% of the people got it right, and we appreciate that. Thank you so much. You restored my faith in humanity again. Good night, everybody. Yeah, thanks for moderating, Dana. I appreciate it. You know that, I'm sure, but... Good night to everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. And don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you made it this far. And we did. We got 51 thumbs up. And rather than keeping you here any longer, we're going to call it kaputs for the night. I got tomorrow night's show ready to go. And I got January and February's archive of 2022 already loaded up into Paint. Now I gotta, because we're starting on Boxing Day, we're gonna do a recap of 2022 headlines, because I'm a sucker for punishment. I'm gonna make it easy anyway. We're just gonna get the most salacious headlines we covered for 12 months and try to cover it between Boxing Day and New Year's Day. I don't know if I can do it, actually, because we cover so much, and so much of it's important. You don't want to skip the important stuff. That's the point of covering it. The problem is you're covering thousands of laws, and a lot of them are similar, so I'll do the best I can. And Ray Thompson was asking about how much water does a reactor use a day. It's 4,800 tons a minute, 1 million gallons a minute. There's 1,440 minutes in a day. And multiply it. Actually, I've done the math in a video somewhere, but you can do the math yourself. Okay, we'll call it a night. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. A wonderful day tomorrow. We'll see everybody on tomorrow night's show at the regular time. God bless everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Take care, folks.